passion of millennials, that interdisciplinary research is very important. Sharing all that is very important. And should we talk about this? So let me hand over to Milena Fischer. Thank you so much.
So first, before I start my solo talk, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I'm a philosopher, actually, I'm a PhD and Nietzsche scholar. So I'm trained in philosophy, but for a longer period of time, I'm actually working in business community. I also have a postgraduate degree in public relations, and this is how I operate. So I operate in between different worlds. So I have one foot in academics, but also I have a pretty strong sense of reality outside of ivory tower of academia, which I think is very conducive to understanding and grasping certain concepts as general as creativity. So maybe I will say a little bit about the creativity post. We launched it with Professor Scott Barrett Hoffman, who probably, if you were interested in psychology of creativity, you probably heard his name. And my other colleague, Elliot Polk, was a philosopher of creativity from Columbia University. Right now, we have a group of probably 300 people from multiple different perspectives who submit the content to our site to sort of share it with the community. This is really interesting experience because you can understand that creativity is a very complex and multi-level phenomenon in itself, right? So you have voices from different parts of the world which are sort of trying to crack that nut. So yes, let me start. I'm going to start like a Hitchcock. So given the time-tested ability of pop psychologists, self-taught gurus, and it's fun, yeah, you can read it yourself. This is actually a quote from Arne Dietrich, which I believe was a speaker here in Sydney, in the creative community. He's a trained psychologist who lost his entire faith in psychology, in psychology of creativity some time ago. He recently published a book, How Creativity Happens in the Brain, and I highly recommend it because it's not only extremely funny and well-written book, but also sort of deals on a deeper level with certain things I'm going to present to you today, which is basically problematic approaches of psychology to the variety of problems in creativity altogether. Why did I have such a dramatic title of this talk? Because I think that something really bad is going on in terms of creativity studies. The studies don't go nowhere. They really don't exhibit much progress. Most of the weight is, of course, placed in psychology, in psychometric studies, which we all know. This is a discipline which is theory, very poor, and rich in a lot of data. So we have studies after studies after studies of little snippets of creative behavior, which don't bring us the big picture. I'm not even going to touch on the subject of replicability of those studies because it's just another bag of worms. But the problem is, and I'm going to move on here, that most of those studies are based on pretty old concept, which is called divergent thinking. You probably heard about it before. This is old test, it's Torrance test, alternative user test. They basically, you know the concept, name as many uses for the break as you can, right? And put it, and then it's judged by originality, fluency, etc., etc. It's basically generation of the most random ideas you can possibly create. Even the creators of this test, a very long time ago, said that this test does not measure creativity. And yet, because due to the lack of sort of progress in the discipline, it still is used as the measure of creative potential, right? Recently, I believe 5 or 6 years ago, psychologists figured out, oh, wait a second, maybe we need this. Divergent thinking doesn't explain everything. Maybe we need something which is called convergent thinking. It's making up another word because convergent thinking actually overlaps almost perfectly with IQ. But nobody, there's no will to sort of clean up the house and figure out what exactly we're talking about here. Recently, I've actually noticed that psychologists from different cognitive psychologists make people from creativity studies, people who study creativity, put the mark in every single study which is published that this is an old test and it shouldn't be used. At this stage, it's comical, right? And then you have the entire study about urgent crisis of creativity worldwide, how creativity declines, right? What to do, how to enhance creativity using the same metrics. So this is a little bit frightening because we still don't know what's the relationship between divergent thinking and creativity. I have a metaphor for you I want to chew on, because there is a slight possibility that divergent thinking is in relation to creativity, like common cold to cold as temperature. If you understand what I mean. It might be, we still use the word common cold, right? You can buy medicine for it. We just know that common cold is not a disease, that it correlates somehow with lower temperatures outside and the drop of immune system, something's going on with the immune system, and then bacteria or viruses are multiplying, and it's not very serious. But there's no immediate correlation between the temperature and common cold, period. So this is sometimes we should think about more complex phenomena like this. So there's another study, maybe I'll just come back. What psychologists are doing right now, which is very fashionable, what they do a little bit out of desperation is they're mapping creativity against personality traits, right? So against big five. So what it sounds odd to me why there's a presumption that certain people with certain personality traits are more creative, because I would say we come in different shapes and sizes, right? But this one is proven in psychology, quote unquote, that people who are open to experience are more likely to be considered creative. And now we have this Molotov cocktail, two things with this whole scenery of studies: openness to experience plus divergent thinking. And now we have, according to current psychology, this is the most creative person on the planet. You probably don't know what it is, who it is. This is a picture I've taken from the internet. This is a girl who is a member of the cult, of the cult of unicorn. They have polyamorous sort of cult of unicorns. Very divergent thinking here on display. Also, I would suspect that this is openness to experience, high up, right? So in psychology, what psychology would test this sort of behavior, very random, very open to sort of new experiences from the outside world, it would rank that girl extremely high on every single possible level of testing. She would score extremely high. My problem, and the problem I think yours to some extent, that there are people who would score miserably on divergent thinking test. And you probably know that guy. There will be absolute misery. This is Nikolai Testa. I believe everybody knows who he is. There's few things which divergent thinking test would never catch, and consider him even remotely creative person. The first one, divergent thinking test is a language test. Please think about it for a second. It has a value in measuring sort of literary skills. Why? Because to come up with 17 different uses for a brick, you need to have a pretty damn good vocabulary to even approach the subject, right? So, and it's not only that English was his second language, just forget about that. I'm thinking about kids who are extremely creative in different disciplines. Let's say kids from inner city who actually grow up in a little bit impoverished environment, who don't have parents with a elaborate language base they can learn from. So passing the language test for them, especially in the first parts of their education, is pretty difficult. And like I said, creativity cannot be collapsed just into some sort of language ability, because creativity happens not only in language, but it happens in many different places. So when you look at that girl in pink, What happens actually in the current, like I said, according to psychology, I would describe that all of this testing plus openness to experience describes sort of artistic personality, person who is open to experience, has a lot of interest, very good language skills, etc., etc. But it's really, this is my question, like I said, in this talk I'm going to have more questions than answers. Is art really a good proxy for understanding creativity altogether? And I want you to think about that because imagine right now that aliens would come finally to planet Earth. And they look at people and they said, oh my goodness, they are completely obsessed with this aesthetic thing, right? First of all, they decorate their houses. They put some pieces of clothing on themselves, but they not even stop there. They change them. They send the signals to other people according to what they actually wear. We have a problem with understanding aesthetics and theory of art because we are sort of like the pickles in a jar. We are completely submerged in aesthetic expressions. We just don't understand. We tend to think about art in terms of what Arthur Danto did to art theory, which is basically more conceptual endeavor. And we completely forget that art is actually everywhere. Sort of aesthetic actions and behaviors are absolutely everywhere. I've learned it actually from my dear Professor Dennis Dutton. Some of you who actually are familiar with our theory probably heard about his book, The Art Instinct. I was extremely lucky to work with him just before he passed away. He was working on the second book on the same subject, trying to sort of polish his take on different understanding of art altogether. Which you might remember, he was saying that the best person to ask what art is for is actually Darwin. He had this sort of Darwinian understanding of any sort of aesthetic activity, which made it widespread. You probably remember this. Probably art plays a role in a lot of signaling, including mating, including fitness, signaling, etc., etc. But not very many people read this. It's on page 53, and this is actually the most explosive part of Dennis Dutton's theory of art, which is basically abandoning the unified and simple version of what art is for this one. If you call it cluster criteria of art. This is our perception of art when we try to actually piece it out and try to figure out how this extremely wide phenomenon works. So please try for a moment. I know it's really hard, but try to look at artistic art in general, not from the perspective of high art masturbation centers like galleries, right? Because excuse my language, sometimes it's just because it has a life of its own, and basically we live right now in terms of history of art in a very peculiar moment when conceptual art completely took over. It's a very short period of time. Imagine that. It was never like that. The art in the space of gallery was completely inaccessible for regular people. I don't know if it went viral. There was a picture of people who were taking picture of glasses at the floor of the gallery. Somebody literally dropped the glasses. They were taking pictures because they thought it's actually the artwork. On the other hand, you have another paradoxes, like you probably heard about the person called Banksy, right? Who's constantly dancing with the entire art world. He's poking fun at sort of hypocrisy of the entire industry. I don't, like I said, I don't mind. Everybody can do whatever. Like I said, I have no, I don't judge anybody's preferences in terms of creativity. But I really encourage you to look at art in this little wider way. And actually, by the way, Dennis Dutton was the first who came up with the cluster criteria. And he was saying in the second book he was working on, he was trying to redefine them. I was doing actually interviews with artists for him for this particular project because he knew that this was the most explosive part of his philosophy. He was undoubtedly The only people who actually paid attention to it, and I was actually witness of the very final discussion, was when Dennis Dadman was giving a keynote, and I was his special guest at APA, American Philosophical Association, the division of aesthetics and art theory. That was a real discussion because nobody noticed, but these people noticed. It's like, what is this? We cannot do that. We have high art, we have low art. We cannot just right? This was the most fire and very interesting discussion. So let me say, I'm not going to go through all of those things because they might not be, you can just read it for themselves. But just a quick overview. Direct pleasure doesn't mean that the picture has to be pretty. Sometimes we as humans have a pleasure from awe, right? Or some sort of element of surprise. I just want you to look at it because this particular cluster criteria of understanding art might explain why computational creativity is dealing right now and will deal in the future with the uncanny valley problem, right? Because uncanny valley problem is that humans have this, that humans, when they approach artificial or anything done by artificial entity, it comes with robotics. And this is why it's uncanny valley. First is they're very enticed. What is it? Right? Then when in robotics, when a robot doesn't act perfectly like humans, it's the feeling of disgust. They're like, ooh. And it's like, so the first one, this is why it's called the uncanny valley. So the first one is a very high interest, then it drops to disgust, and then sort of it's built a little bit up from that point to sort of create a trust between the machine and the human. But this is particularly important for when you look at how people actually, what's the perception of art, how multi-level that is. What is really different, the same problem you will have or you have already. When people have the reaction, right? Oh, it's made by computer, so I sort of filter it through it. Why do they do that? Just because of that, because there's a lot of signaling in our perception of art. There's a lot of, it's not only intellectual challenge, but look at some of them. Expressive individuality is something which maybe I should explain a little bit more. You understand that some people just follow one artist. You have a fan base, it happens in the world, right? They just love it. Like I know followers of kids or whatever. It's not even it's not even aesthetically that amazing, but for people who are, they get invested because they love the individuality of that person. This is something which on the level of computational creativity, you'll have a problem to jump over this hurdle because it's so deeply ingrained that humans, this is the human perception of art, right? You also see that novelty and creativity is just only one category here. Also the style. We had a wonderful talk about poetry yesterday. When I was speaking about the concept of style with Nikki Giovanni, she told me something amazing. She said, every poet needs to work on his voice. Which again, you see sense as that, to sort of fostering this amazing individual makeup. This is appealing to people when you have your own individual shape and form, and we sort of, as humans, in aesthetic, contemplation, we take it under consideration very seriously. And like I said, Dennis Dadman put art traditions and institutions as only one factor. And I know, in Manhattan, there's a lot of people who don't even enjoy art, but they take very strong cues from curators, right? So they know what's in. I don't know the level of their actually, being enticed by the work of art per se, right? But they sort of take cues from curators and they think this is authority, obviously, this is the source of value. This is the reason why in creativity you have value and novelty. So I don't know what to do with this. I'm just throwing it out there. It's just the only thing which it shows that, like I said, our understanding and perception of art or artifacts is way more complex than we give ourselves credit for. Some even, in the business world, some people say that this is the reason why Steve Jobs, of course, Steve Jobs was a phenomenal marketer, but he hijacked sort of aesthetic pleasure. He made beautiful things, which was from the very beginning very expensive, but people had pleasure to own it, to hold it, right? He hijacked this sort of thing. Like I said, imaginative experience, those are complex categories, and you probably, if you know a little bit about our theory, he was fighting with this entire book with Steven Pinker's approach that art is just basically cheesecake for the mind. That it's worthless, it's just some sort of activity we do to occupy our huge brains because we should be more productive, but we sort of have a pleasure. It's a lot of people compare it to the value of pornography, right? Somehow we have pleasure from something which is maybe not even that productive for us as humans altogether. So this is why I'm saying sometimes I wake up and I think that art is a good proxy for understanding creativity, and other days I have serious doubts. Because why? Because this is our reaction as humans to aesthetic experience is so extremely multi-level. You probably know from developmental psychology or from when you have children, you can make an infant cry playing them atonal music. Like, you know, it's just like how deep this stuff goes. We have very little understanding. Like I said, it's not only multi-level. Right? It just moves us in a very peculiar way, which other disciplines, which have, and we use the term different design space, don't have that power. I mean, they do at some moment when you are intimate with a discipline. Like theoretical physicists will tell you that, you know, certain equations are beautiful or elegant. They use when you get intimate with the subject. I will tell you as a philosopher, some good argument makes me cry. Literally. I was sobbing, I can sob over Aristotle. I might not agree with him, but it's like, oh my goodness, this is just splendid. So when we get in creativity, in different design space, we have to get familiar, or like I said, more intimate with the discipline to have this sort of experience. With this mess, everybody has it. And everybody has it, and look at this, how much of the individual differences are imprinted in this one, right? Because some people will completely only look in art and be moved by, let's say, emotional saturation. I know people like that, they want drama, right? So only something which is particularly dramatic. Some people will look for intellectual challenge, those between the champ, right? Most of this stuff. Some of them will look for criticism. This is the art which is engaged in sort of political processes and also is basically criticized what we're looking for. So like I said, it's amazingly, because it's so widespread, it's so complex, that art sometimes, like I said, might be a good proxy, but might be the worst possible proxy to understand what is the underlying mechanism of creativity altogether. And also, as with that digression, this baffles me. Like I said, on my bad days, when I think that art is just, we cannot understand creativity through art, I think about ancient Greeks. They kicked them out. They kicked out the poets from Polis, right? It was Plato. He was like, no, you artists, you are golden if you just basically mimic nature. If you do it perfectly, you remember the statues, right? They're almost identical, they're hyper realistic. So if you do that, because nature is the most awesome, you can stay inside of the polis, right? Inside of the study. But don't do that crazy stuff, like poetry or something, just go away, you just create chaos. And we cannot say we cannot say that Greeks were not creative. This is the base for science. This is where a lot of facets of our civilization was born. And I would even argue that maybe the roots of creativity took the right place because, well, science was born. For that matter, we abandoned religion and moved into something else. Now, this is another question. I have no answer. You probably heard why do I think we have this sort of strong perception, where this sort of sense of individuality comes from, which, like I said, it's crucial probably for understanding art creation in general. We humans are not computers. We don't compute the same way as computers, as we know. We have two systems of operation. It's system one, which is also called the implicit system, which is basically calibrated fully for efficiency. Most of the time, we just use system one. And system two is a deliberate type of thinking, called explicit system, and it's meant to be used for precision, accuracy, right? So we sort of switch between those two processes. And I think because, as you know, our memory system, we don't have a photographic memory. We don't remember things a certain way. We constantly create heuristics. And those heuristics, the way we package the world from the very beginning and move a lot of things from system two to system one constantly, this is what creates this sort of interesting makeup that we are very unique cookies, because we don't, this sense of individuality and uniqueness comes from our way how we package the input from the outside world. And I find it interesting. It's not, I find it surprising that outside of art literature and a lot of people, we don't think about creative process that would incorporate both of those processes. What is that? But in art, this is what my point actually. This is the only system. This is the only system in system one. Only art can. Yeah. Learning only happens. The acquisition of new knowledge only happens in system two. System one is, like I said, sort of pre-made stuff we put in system one, mostly automatic. It's beautifully illustrated by the difference between musical or verbal improvisation and non-improvising, which is basically playing or composing the piece of art. So in system one, I'm going to use I'm not good with jazz music, but I'm pretty good with rap music. You have people who can freestyle, which is just basically improvisation. But it's only a percentage of them that can actually do. And I know how the sausage is made on the backside. It's not that they're just brilliant. They just sit and, it comes from my imagination. No. When they hear the phrase, which they like, when they do the bar, right? They really like it. They repeat it over and over and over again, sometimes at random. They just repeat it. They packet certain phrases from system two to phrases they like, and then they sort of release them through the system one because it's so automatic for them that it's like a mixer, right? But there's no new knowledge coming from system one. It's only combinational sort of mixing and matching. There's no new, but it might happen, like I said, experimentally it's very hard to prove. But this is one of the hypotheses a lot of people have, that this is how it works. By analyzing, it's easier, like I said, with rappers because it's language, right? With music, with tones, it's not that obvious. But then you have just words, and those are the same words which are sort of constantly used by them. But there's a lot of amazing artists who don't even use the system one. They can only operate and create a beautiful, beautiful art using the system two. System two heavily relies on prefrontal cortex, right? It's just basically heavily relies on cognition. And adding new stuff, playing with stuff, adding new stuff. And it might be, and I'm not sure, that maybe creativity only happens in system two. Think about it for a second, that system one and art created in system one might be some sort of anomaly. Maybe we need learning process to be creative, period. And we are taking the entire discipline to the place that we give them the illusion that if only you go into the happy place, or if only you use your imagination, which we still don't know what it is exactly, or if only you follow your dreams, right? Without the input of the sort of being open to acquire new knowledge and reconfigure. Very important thing about system 2 is like, humans, like I said, are not computers. So to retain any piece of new information, which is learning process, we have to make immediate connections with something. We don't remember things which are disconnected or disjointed, right? So every single time we experience something, we have to connect it with different things. And you see the process. We are making it here. Then if it's a good connection, it works for me, pushing it out. So it makes it almost automatic. But like I said, acquiring of new information, new knowledge happens in system 2 only. Side note, my dear friend Friedrich Nietzsche actually stumbled upon that situation. Do you remember Dionysian and Apollonian art? Exactly. So he was talking about Dionysian instinctual art as art coming from system 1. He actually liked it better than Apollonian art, but he figured it out. I don't know how. He was probably pretty smart. He figured out that we create art in 2 different systems, and they are significantly different from one from another, right? That this requires sort of looking back, just to make it more clear for you guys, for those who are not familiar with this. Do you remember when you started driving a car? Right, the first time you sit behind the wheel, you are fully conscious of every single thing you're doing. Sweaty palms, right? You have no motoric skills. When you move successfully the motoric skill of driving a car to system 1, your nature relies on the system 1 so strongly that sometimes when you go from point A to point B, you don't remember how you got there, especially in a familiar neighborhood. This is remarkable, and it happens with the motoric complex skills. Imagine the same thing happens with cognition. I have no doubt about it, that we have certain, and this is what we do heuristics, right, to understand certain things. We also have biases, right? This is the source. Why do we get rigid cognitively when we have too much knowledge? Because we too comfortably package those knowledge and too much rely on sort of shortcuts from the very beginning, right? Those are good shortcuts, but creativity is lost in translation here. So I said it a very long time ago, but I had sort of, it might be that critical thinking is more important for creativity than anything else. Think about it for a second, let's see. Because at the end of the day, if you have the capacity to question your knowledge, to sort of observe your heuristics and biases, which you yourself created through the process of education, this is when the spark of creativity happens. I'm going to rely on 2 authors here. Again, I will come back to Nietzsche because he was good with metaphors. People who are not psychologists and who are pondering over how creative process works, they thought about the process in a more complex way, like I said before. Not through the salad of studies, right? They look at the subject in a more broader way. And I will give you the metaphors from Nietzsche. He was describing the evolution of human spirit. So, excuse the 19th century language. But the first thing he said, what we have to take under consideration in every, not creative process per se, because for him, Overman was a creative person. Here, this is the reason I'm interested in the subject partially. That was the pinnacle. Creativity is the pinnacle of humanity. He said the first step is always, you have to become a camel. You have to take on your back as much knowledge possible for you to not to knee to the ground, right? So the first part of every single, if you approach any subject, this is the first part. It's a massive amount of knowledge. It's really interesting in computation and creativity. You cannot do imagination without content. This is why I love you guys, right? You have to have a certain amount of data to draw from, right? To just actually make something creative. The second step is, this is what I suspect might be in the system. You reflect, self-reflect on your own biases, and you become a lion. which is basically this aspect of defiance against rules you sort of see yourself. So you question rules, you build your knowledge upon. That would be pretty good for sort of transformational creativity, because philosophers are interested in that kind of stuff. And then you become a child, which is basically the joy of creation, because you did this two-step dance with it. First is a very structured knowledge, good knowledge, and then you reflect upon certain structures you created yourself for the sake. And this is, yeah, kind of intuitive. There's another person who actually repeats this whole two-step dance. It is my favorite author, and by the way, it's the best book on creativity created recently. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. You probably heard of Robert Greene because he wrote 48 Laws of Power. He's not a psychologist. He has the methodology of sort of ancient philosopher a little bit, because this is exactly how he explained to me how he writes books on such a wide subject. It's like, first, I read everything I can on the subject. Then certain pattern emerges from all of this thinking. And that will sort of explain why this first step as a knowledge building is so critical with the whole process. He also, in the book Mastery, which I highly recommend, he's talking about the importance of apprenticeship, right? You have to gain knowledge first to basically give yourself a chance to be creative. Why am I pounding on that subject so hard? Because if we remember the girl in the pink situation, if we in education system or in business world start selling people snake oil, which means go to your imagination only, be creative, be divergent, connect dots from different disciplines, we might be harming real people in real life. And I see it as a PR person that it already takes a hold. I'm not, in this talk, I really want to say that my intention is not to in any way diminish the amazing work psychologists and scientists do all over the world. They're doing their best. After all, they're dealing with a very difficult subject, because, like we all know, some of you yesterday even gave up on just proper definition of creativity. It's a nightmare, right? You have creativity defined by two different words which are not stable epistemologically, which means they're context dependent. So it is a long road. But at the end of the day, what happens right now, and I see it through the creativity post, we have an enormous vacuum between what we actually know about creativity and what is the public interest in the subject. And I will give you, and we give crazy answers, because you know what pop psychologists do with the subject, right? Oh, you have to be, imagination, mindfulness, all this sort of, oh, you have to be super imaginative. The problem is that people implement that stuff because they're so depleted of any sort of guidelines. I will give you an example, like I said, one from business, one from education. In the business world, work dramatically changed recently, if you haven't noticed. It's a lot of disruptive innovation going on. So IBM does the study once in 2 years, I believe, when they ask CEOs. It's a small sample, but those are the top 68 or 69 CEOs on the planet. They ask them a lot of different questions. It's a survey, but they also ask them the question: what is the most desirable trait in people you want to hire, or leaders of the future? And 4 years ago, surprise, surprise, creativity was on the first place. They look for creative people because, first of all, they were bruised by creativity heavily. Creative behavior, like creating Uber or e-commerce or altogether, they disrupt the entire industries rapidly. So for the CEOs, like, holy smokes, what is that thing? It used to be very easy. I go to the Ivy League school, I have a very nice job, and life is perfect. What is that nonsense? just for the control group, before creativity, the most desired trait was the prominent worldview, right? Something which you get from Ivy School because you have access to information that nobody else has access to. But now, look what happened. Everybody has access to information. There are people who can do with information a lot of things. So everybody's starting to think, it's not about information, it's what you do with the information, which matters. Which, at the end of the day, when we think about creativity from this angle, that it's, this is how I understand it. It's not by no means chaotic or random behavior. It's the sort of conscious understanding of your design space. Richer the tapestry of your design space, more things you add from the outside world and make valuable connections, more creative you become. I have no proof to give you right now, but this is there's something different in the whole process. It would explain why people like the girl in pink, it's a novelty, but value is almost minimal, right? Of this what she's doing. Also, when I look back to divergent thinking test, there's a certain substance in the United States which is legal for recreational use in multiple states. If you use that substance, and I did, you'll probably pursue divergent thinking as well. But this is still not a creativity, right? Per se, creative effort, and I see it's very vivid in entrepreneurship. When it's not enough to have a good idea, to be entrepreneur, bones and meat, you have to understand business, environment. Your design space has to be huge, right? Because first of all, you have to understand the product, you have to understand the environment, you have to understand how all of those things are connected. You have to understand demographics, yada yada yada, marketing, etc. A lot of different disciplines. And what I see right now, because it's such a with this massive amount of literature, which is based on very poor research in psychology, I see books, how to become entrepreneur, fail fast, fail whatever. Have you ever been outside maybe and see, if you fail fast twice, even with the best idea on the planet, do you think you're gonna get financing for the third trial? What are you all talking about here? This is what I call, selling a snake oil, that there's something kumbaya about our understanding of creativity, which is not complete. We have to drop it. We have to start thinking about that subject a little bit different and more serious level. Like I said, I don't blame psychologists per se, because this subject is horrible. But at the end of the day, creating this sort of kumbaya version of creativity is also not good. Like I said, another voice is from education system. And this is really scary for me because, I'm in touch with teachers who, some of them write for me. And they're coming to me, and they're saying, listen, the world is changing so fast that I'm having a kid, 7 years old, and I have no idea what kind of jobs they will have a chance for in 10 years. No idea. So they're sort of clinging to creativity because they think that computational creativity doesn't exist. In their brains, it's like the only thing I can give that kid. So I will not squish this kid's creativity, right? So they do is artistic, and this is a problem because if teachers don't understand what is the real source of creativity, and they start to go astray in terms of let's just follow your dreams, not jobs. Then they actually, instead of good intentions, might have a very poor consequences. So this is the reason why when I'm saying this is urgent stuff, we have to shape up. This is a quote from Miller, one of the fathers of cognitive revolution. And I came to you, and I'm honored to speak to you because I strongly believe that you guys are waiting somewhere in here. Think about it. You have a very strong philosophical muscle because you constantly have to, because you do experiments, you constantly have to question the basis of your knowledge. You also can run experiments very, very quickly without even oh, maybe this works, maybe this doesn't work, right? Without interdisciplinary effort, like it was done during the cognitive revolution, we will not move an inch in this discipline. And look at the beauty of this quote. What a humility, what a responsibility, because at the end of the day, we all came to the subject of science to understand something better. And I see the trend right now that everything else is more important. Selling books is more important, right? Hype is more important. And I understand that people have to eat. But at the end of the day, we are scientists for that reason, that we really want to get to the bottom of things. And with the subject as complex as creativity, we will not move an inch if we won't take upon us a more interdisciplinary, reasonable discussion between disciplines. And with that, thank you very much for listening to my creativity.
Highlight something that came up on Twitter. Gillian Smith said that Milena is smoothly moving from philosophy to cognitive science to psychology to art. And I think you've done a fantastic job of smoothly moving across the discipline. So, have we got any questions? Philippe?
Yeah, a question. So, given that those creativity tests are heavily used by HR and recruitment all over the world,
They're not used sporadically. I mean, under the covers, because it's illegal to test people, straightforward, yet. But I can tell you right now, because this is a funny story, how pop psychology goes to the heads of business people. This is really interesting. So first wave, because of openness to experience, right? It's a beautiful openness to experience. Let's just open every single space in every single office space. Let's put everybody in one room. It's going to boost creativity at no time. Doesn't matter, you know. You shouldn't use desk either, right? You should stand or maybe be on the bike or whatever. The problem is that half of the population is introverted. I'm an extrovert and I cannot work when people, running around constantly. So the whole project is finally abandoned. People putting back the regular office space, because it might be good for certain companies. I think it might be good for design companies, because, in certain cases. And now I hear over and over from people, because it's a big community and I'm listening to everybody. It's like, yeah, the only way to boost creativity in a company is to hire creative people. What does it mean? They will start testing. And they will start testing with what? With what they have. Because like I said, it's like people who are working outside of academia, if they are not provided with sufficient tools for operation, they will use whatever is available. And this is why I'm passionate about that subject, because I can understand how much damage lagging behind might cause in the future. It might be completely counterproductive for the effects we want to accomplish.
I found interesting the two systems you put there, no? But in fact, I developed a system inspired by those two ideas. But I think I disagree with you when you say that the creative thing happens in the second system. I think the creative thing happens in the interaction between both of the systems, not just in the other rationale. In my model, the system generates output, sometimes using just the system 2, sometimes just using the system 1. But when they combine, it's when the best outputs are produced. Of course, the model is not the same for humans, but this clearly suggests that. In fact, many artists also report that, knowing that sometimes people reports are not very truthful, but how things start not to live. Aaron Copland, for example, described different types of composers, and some of them are those who just and then analyze.
Well, this is the distinction, and I highly again. I'm going to recommend this book by Arnie again, because he makes a distinction with the state of flow, and sometimes we confuse, which is a category of itself, and sometimes you have sort of loss of time, and you think you're using system 1, but it's actually perfectly human state of flow, which is described as sort of lost in time, it's a little bit different than system 1 and system 2. So it's like I said, humans and I actually agree with you, because I don't believe that in system 1 there's no learning. A lot of people say that language acquisition, first language acquisition happens through system 1 without rules whatsoever, right? That all of the inputs sort of chaotic, and you're in the world, and this is how we learn the first language. But there's something interesting in it. It might stop at the age of 21 when prefrontal cortex stops growing. Think about it for a second, because then after this age when all of the structure in prefrontal cortex gets settled down and connected the way we should, it might be that learning, that statement is actually accurate. And after this age, after we develop fully, then system 2 takes over learning altogether, because they don't want to mess up this stuff. So I don't know if that's answers.
I think I'm shocked when Caroline for the first time I saw go.
First of all, thank you for this lively talk. You bring the humanist perspective to the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of the examples were from art, and it seemed from visual art. But would the same kind of arguments also be applicable to other kinds of creativity domains, let's say music, dance, poetry, storytelling, or even further meaning, say it's from science or design or mathematics?
See, this is what I'm trying to describe, that the design space for art, we have tools to, as other humans, to react very emotionally and on a deep level to works of art. And of course, in visual arts and music in particular, music is even more sort of intuitive and for other humans to, we can change our mood. How crazy is that? Think about it for a second, right? You turn the music on and the entire emotional makeup changes. This is just the dependence on this type of creation is enormous. But I think, like I said, for other types of creativity, when you move, you have to move to the different design space. Like in science, you need more information. You need more intel from system 2. You need a lot of, this tapestry of that design space has to be rich, has to be accurate, and we have to have this sort of way of re-examining all of this knowledge, how we package that knowledge in those little boxes. So I think for me that will be, but I know artists, on the other hand, who are extremely intellectually driven, and some artists will tell you that they struggle with one problem their entire life, right? And they solve the problem, they literally use this verbiage, they try to solve the problem they have on their minds, and they spend entire life solving the problem. So it's like I said, art is complicated because art is so visceral that it creates complications. So we don't see exactly these processes as easy as we see in more complex design space situations. We have a lot of sort of noise because we react immediately to the works of art. People usually don't react to mathematical equation in this case, right? So it's just it's more complex.
Caroline.
So I'd like to challenge your attack on
Yes,
pop psychology, if I may. So I think pop psychology, my definition of pop psychology, is psychology which is written for people who aren't experts. Yeah? And there are two kinds of pop psychology on that kind. There's the kind that's good and well-informed and well-written, which informs the public about science. And there's the kind that's bullshit. The kind that's bullshit is based on people reading pop psychology and not understanding the background. Now, if we're going to talk about these kinds of things, particularly if we're going to make judgments, then I think it's quite important that we get our facts right. Could we go back to the two systems slide there? Mm-hmm. You were talking about the distinction between these two things. These things are generative systems that we're talking about there. We're talking about the ability to reason and the ability to produce, okay, from the psychological perspective. And that's not the same thing as the learning process to which you were referring when you were talking about encoding motor action. So Karmanoff-Smith studied that extensively back in the 80s and 90s, and it's pretty well understood. What that supplies is the background knowledge, as you said, for the things from which these inferences are made. Mm-hmm. And both of these systems can use any of that information, including the stuff, as you said, is implicitly learned from language. But this is really well established. You know, you can't just say, hey, we think it's a bit like that. No, actually, we know it's like that. We don't know exactly what the mechanism is, but we do know that language is learned implicitly in this way. And it continues to be learned implicitly in this way throughout life. Yeah? So there are lots of things we know. And I think it's quite important if we're going to start criticizing people I'm sorry, I have to say this, in racist terms, kumbaya is a racist slur, and we shouldn't be saying that. We shouldn't be using that as a term of denigration. Then we should get our facts right about this kind of stuff.
I'm
Sorry, I just have to say that.
Thank you for the input, and from the bottom of my heart, you also have to remember that English is my second language, and I would really plead with you for a little bit more understanding in this department. And if I made some mistakes, it's just sometimes because of certain shortcuts. But point taken, I understand. If you're telling me that's a well-established way of looking at things, I use this sort of vague description of it because I know that there's in description of system 1 and system 2, they don't fully overlap with implicit and explicit system in the other. Right, so I just didn't want to just put everything on the table because they don't perfectly overlap. Implicit system sometimes is considered completely unconscious, consciousness, they can, right? So this is the reason why I provide this sort of vague signal that this is that, but it's still a little bit of discussion between them, and they are named in different places a little bit.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. You were saying that creativity is more than divergent thinking. I agree with. And you were suggesting that if people only focus on those kind of activities which support divergent thinking, then we're not going the whole distance. Since my understanding what you're saying is that other areas we should look at are aesthetic sensibility and reasoning. Are there kinds of activities that are associated with those things that you think you should be doing, rather than just we shouldn't just be doing the discouragement of divergent thinking? What are some of the other activities or things which we should do that are going to promote those?
I would, from purely my perspective, at the end of the talk, I signaled this thing that I'm concerned that we forget about acquisition of knowledge altogether. That we'll forget that it's super important for people to understand the underlying structure of certain things, that will go astray into the way that we can basically pull everything out of our imagination. It sounds to me like a fallacy, that it's just creativity doesn't work this way. So if we put, it's more an effort, like what's the emphasis, right? Where do you put emphasis? And I think it's prematurely. And like I said, I criticize my colleagues as philosophers do, because this is what we do. We're like watchdogs for epistemological hygiene, more than anything else. And they can lecture me, and I think we all should have this sort of honest discussion about those things, because it's a lot of things at stake. And yes, coming, you know, I'm not a researcher, but also I'm not going to fold too prematurely because I have a pretty good understanding of epistemology, which comes from philosophy, which just gives you a hint what solutions are epistemologically possible and, like I said, epistemologically sound, which avenue you can take to proceed. So I don't know if I asked you the question. Like I said, this talk is more about asking questions. It's more about giving you something to think about than providing you with answers. I truly don't know. What I would like to do, and I would love to invite you, because this summer I'm going to rebuild the entire site and make a lot of room for a lot of things. So if any of you would be interested in, I don't know, surveys on the website or any other output, I talked to Anna about it, that because of this uncanny valley problem we'll probably be facing for a period of time. Oh, I can even tell you for how long, probably for 10 years, because 10 years is usually when the habits are changing. People will get used to it. The thing is to make people get used to it, that artificial systems are making art. We have to talk to them and make them familiar with the subject, right? It comes from a PR person. You just have to say, hey, we have something which is called computational creativity. Oh, I don't know what it is. Hey, second time. Oh, listen, we are still here. Oh, I don't know about that. Oh, whoa, look, they're here all the time. Maybe there's this is the thing, right? So you just basically use habituation to overcome certain things and create a curiosity and people get just more familiar with the entire
Just tell us the URL for the creativity post.
creativity post, everything.
If people want to get involved and write articles.
Oh my goodness, just write to me. I really encourage you to use my private email, which is very simple, milena.fisher@gmail.com. Because the other thing goes through internet and sometimes yes. So if you have any ideas how I can help you, and any ideas how if you want to go to the wider public, right now at this day we have probably 500,000 people who are interested in signing on from different platforms. So it's nothing to be nothing to sneeze at, right? And those are people very nicely targeted because they are all interested in what creativity really is. So this is a nice targeted audience. There's no accidental people who like cats on the internet, right? So this is great to know.
Yeah, Tom first, and then Tony.
Thanks for your talk. I have an idea of unpacking here with you. I thought it was very interesting how you talked about how art is a cluster concept, which I think for this community will be very familiar because it's studied art papers on Lakoff and cognitive blending. However, you've also said that it's creativity and how art are related is a desired trait. You know, it's a desired trait when hiring, it's a desired trait for parents with the children, and important for this community, it's a desired trait of the work we're doing. Problem is it's been hard to define, and so it has what I call kind of a pornography definition, where a lot of maker famously said, "I don't know what pornography is, but I know when I see it." This isn't unprecedented in science, and in fact has happened with other cluster concepts before. So, in the 1500s, philosophers mocked the idea that temperature would ever be measurable, because at the time we have sort of primitive understanding. I mean, we had a different concept of temperature at the time. However, when the thermometer was invented, it moved science forward. It was a simpler definition of temperature, but it allowed progress to be made with it. And so my question is in that vein, do you think there's a proxy for what we now call creativity, which might be more measurable? Or is there suggestions for what we could use as a creativity thermometer? You said you don't want divergent tests, divergent thinking tests, but are there other things which might somewhat simplify the concept or might it might lose some of the definition, but it would make it clear, it would be more measurable?
Honestly, I have no idea. I like the concept of design space because it gives a little bit of clarity. And I'm holding on to this one with my dear life because I think there's something in it. If you remember this mythical, sometimes we fall into the notion that Einstein didn't understand mathematics or some nonsense like that. So of course it's not true, right? People who move, especially higher level complexity disciplines forward, they very well understand it. They have this act, I call it sometimes the act of defiance. This is the reason I brought up lion, this metaphor of lion, and sort of, let's look how we created that knowledge, right? Let's look at the paradigm we're operating under. Maybe there's something we overlook. Maybe there's something which basically is we put it here because of bias or sort of premature heuristic, right? And I think this is how that would be my guess, that those are people, creative people who, like I said again, it's very complex, and I'm not trying to even pretend that I have a key, golden key to understanding it. What I'm trying to communicate with you guys is the urgency to sort of try to get it right, and I think that interdisciplinary studying would give hope, because it was done, like I said, in cognitive revolution. It was done sort of intentionally because like, hey, listen, what can we actually agree upon, right? We have so many good stuff happening after it. The conscious decision of few scientists who, by the way, didn't have a high-speed internet. They met, in analog way, at Princeton University for once in 6 months to discuss certain things. And I think this little bit of, sort of intellectual humility and sort of having an arms on the prize, because there's a lot at stake.
Especially as somebody coming from PR, I was wondering how you might suggest that people that are non-experts and outside of the institution, like a lot of people, they don't even know the word interdisciplinary. How you might introduce the idea of having design spaces and intellectual pursuits as art.
What do you mean as art?
Because there's this, like you were talking
As
about.
creative effort, I would
Yeah.
say. I would use the word art.
Like when you're talking about Nietzsche, like having the Dionysian ideal, connecting it to like the.
I think, yeah, I would use philosophy because it's the closest to my heart, and like I said, I have a rich tapestry of understanding of what philosophy was made of. It's thought, it used to be thought, I don't know, here, but in Europe, you separate epistemology from ontology, right? Those are like building blocks. Then you go through different systems of philosophers, sort of try to pack how those things fall into these categories. And you make it richer and richer and richer with more information, which is, like I said, compartmentalized in a certain way. And I think for phenomenal artists, and like I said, for Professor Dennis Dutton, I was able to talk to some really good ones. They have the same methodology. There's not that much room for them for just purely frivolous behavior. They don't even use those terms. When they get really serious about their creation, they treat it like they constantly add to, like I said, their own design space, whatever problem they're trying to crack. And they struggle with it, and they get inspiration from different sources to make it richer, right? And that's a great process in art too. But like I said, if you look at art only, we should use it as a proxy for understanding the entire thing about creativity. It gets a little bit deceptive because some disciplines, when you can be still creative, in science, they require a lot of footwork, right? Before you actually make the first creative move in the field of organic chemistry. Oh, it takes a lot of design space, little, right? Things you have to put in order to actually to be a meaningful discovery.
Maybe I should clarify. Those are outside of, say, academia. They understand creativity mainly through art. They don't necessarily think about science. So how to reach out to those kinds of people and show that our creativity is more than art.
I think it's through just constant messaging. What I would love to do, and this is really why I'm remodeling for the site, even creating a pushback against this constant, like I said, frivolous understanding of creativity. Giving some, so it's a little bit more balanced discussion, right? So this is the reason why I love you guys, was on my heart, because you provide a more structured understanding and reflection on certain things, right? So even if you balance it properly, it gives people who are truly interested in the subject something to chew on, right? In the process, they always like, oh, maybe this is that, maybe this is that, right? And especially if we can get committed to sort of more, that would be my dream, to more interdisciplinary conversation about it and share with the audience in a certain way that this is what we're doing, that we're trying to sort of take a step back, right, and think about creativity in a different way. It's just a matter of writing a decent article, which will not be too complex. This is, sometimes we don't give enough credit, most people, business people, they're looking for serious answers. It's not like, this is a subject that will take lightly. It's serious stuff for them. Not for a reason that they're so sophisticated and they woke up one day and, I'm gonna love creativity altogether. Now it's a pressure from the marketplace to implement, right, in the realm of innovation.
I think I promised Tony he would ask a question, but then we'll have to save the rest of the questions for the coffee break, which is rapidly approaching. Tony, our last question.
Thank you. Thank you for a great talk, for focusing on System 1 and System 2, which I think are, even though they're caricatures, they're a great way of thinking about the competing forces in the mind. And I think it's implicit in Chrysler, by the way. Art Chrysler's 1964 by association, he talks about reaching conclusions by illogical means and then validating them, recognizing them as truth. But I want to echo what Raphael said. It's the interaction between System 1 and System 2 that's really interesting. In when you say something is funny, peculiar, I left my keys here and out of there, that's the system 1 and system 2 competing for human explanation. And in comedy, in humor, it's the competition between system 1 and system 2 and the race conditions that arise. But they work at different speeds. That gives you the feeling of comedy and resolution. So they're competitive within the same person. They're also competitive between people. So comedians hack the system 1 of their audience to get them to jump to conclusions while they're thinking in system 2 mode. And their system 2 is ahead of the audience, whose system 2 catches up and goes, I get it. So a lot of creativity works by exploiting the competition between these two systems in the same person, but between different people as well.
See, point taken. Yeah, I told you I learned more from you than you learned from me from the very beginning, so thank you so much for clarifying it. What I brought it up because my point is that learning hard facts happens in system 2, and sometimes we just put too much stock in the system.
Okay. I know there's more questions, I'm sorry we can't have
Oh, we
one
can all
session,
continue.
but Marlon, we say all week, you're with us?
Yep, I'm with you. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer any.
So before we thank Milena again, so a couple of just housekeeping things. We'll have a coffee break now until 10:30. Then we'll have the complementary on creativity session. So the people who are presenting the next session, if you could just come up and check that your slides are okay, etc. People with posters, if you have them now and you'd like to put them up, come and see Mikhail. Otherwise, enjoy coffee, let's have a chat, and let's have a round of applause.
come here.